So Jason's going to talk about the Climate Genocide Act Now campaign, a group of local people who came together and said, we're going to try something different. Jason. Dennis, I think I can go.
Okay, hello. So yes, we just heard about climate change, and it's clear that if we carry on along our current path, things are just going to get worse and worse and worse. So what needs to be done? We need to greatly reduce the amount of carbon dioxide, methane, other greenhouse gases in the air. How is this to be done? Not by sitting around waiting for governments to take the initiative, and not by waiting for businesses to grow a conscience. Although if you ask them, they'll tell you that's what they're doing. They'll tell you they take climate change ever so seriously. James Duddridge, our MP here in Southend East, he goes so far as to say that climate change is one of the most serious long-term economic threats that we face. They set targets, they make pledges, they agree they'll do it, but they assure us that by 2030 or 2050, they'll have the situation completely under control. And then they approve a third runway at Heathrow. Then they give the green light to fracking. Then they cut funding for renewables. It doesn't add up. So at the beginning of this year, a group of us, kind of led by John there, but a group of us based here in Southend, we set up a group called the Climate Genocide Act Now movement. That's Act Now is a bit of an exhortation, but really Climate Genocide Act as in Act of Parliament, as in a new law. It should be illegal to emit significant amounts of greenhouse gases into the air. If you do something here and over here, people die, people are injured, people are diseased, their houses are flooded because of what you're doing here, that should be a crime. You should be accountable for that. And there are various legal precedents to say that you can be held accountable for that. So the Climate Genocide Act Now group, we've had two main tasks, and one of them is to try and spread this idea, this strategy of combating climate change in the courts through litigation. The other is, of course, to try and make it happen. In terms of spreading the idea, so we've been talking to all sorts of people. Right from the start, we contacted all the government ministers, all the shadow ministers. We've been having back and forth exchanges with them, which mostly involve them trying to change the subject, trying to avoid looking at it, but we keep hammering away at them. We've been making contact with all different environmental groups and charities. We've been corresponding with lawyers, businesses, campaigners. We've stuck a leaflet through basically every single letterbox in Theresa May's constituency, Maidenhead, and every single letterbox in Greg Clark's constituency, Tunbridge Wells. Greg Clark is, of course, the head of the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, which is how seriously the Conservatives take climate change, because it was the Department for Energy and Climate Change, but then they scrapped that and now it's the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. Also, what else have we done? We've been trying to get people around the country to write to their own MPs to tell them what's coming. We organised a conference along these lines in Conway Hall in London just a few weeks back. So we had people from all different areas of expertise looking at this idea of climate change related litigation, and people talking about, okay, what has to happen next? And it's by no means just us talking about this. For instance, we just heard that in the new year there's another group completely unconnected with us, but they're doing their own conference in London looking at the extent to which the directors, the trustees of companies or corporations will be liable in the sort of lawsuits that we're talking about. A representative from Barclays Bank is going along to that. So just the fact, whatever Barclays are saying, the fact that they're going along, they're allowing their name to be used in connection with this conference, they're taking it seriously. And in other countries, they're way ahead of us. They're not just discussing this, they're doing it. There are climate change related lawsuits, it's just starting. But in America, a few places in Europe, there's something happening in the Philippines, in Pakistan, this is happening now. So it's important to talk about it, to keep pushing it, promoting this idea, to give it that avalanche effect. In terms of actually making it happen here, the Climate Genocide Act, one of the the best contacts we've made since we started this has been a lawyer, a barrister named Tim Crosland with a group called Plan B. And Plan B take a slightly different approach to us. They say we don't need a new law. They say that under existing law, under the law as it is, it should be possible to prosecute people who are emitting massive amounts of greenhouse gases. As it is, they know what they're doing. There's no dispute about the consequences of what they're doing, therefore they can be held accountable for it. So to an extent, the Climate Genocide Act specifically is kind of being put to one side. It's sort of a plan C for the time being. If existing law isn't sufficient, then okay, we will need a new law. But our kind of immediate next step will be helping Tim Crosland and Plan B with their work, trying to push that. 1 minute. So the next step of this kind of phase will be probably a judicial review, or perhaps several judicial reviews. So that will involve, as I understand, I think with law, with policy, it gets quite complicated quite quickly. But I think a judicial review will involve very formally going through all the government's legal commitments to tackling climate change. And then going through all the government is doing, or they're saying, all the decisions they're making, and then saying, do these add up to a coherent, sensible energy policy or not? And if not, then with this judicial review, it'll be the point of the role of the law to step in and try and fix the situation. If it's not working, then to make it work, to right that wrong, which is the point of the law. So yeah, so that's what we're doing. The Climate Genocide Act now, these are the kind of direction we're going in. If you want to know more about what we're doing, if you want to get involved, we've got a Facebook page, Climate Genocide Act Now. We post regular updates or talk to us. Our next steps, on the one hand, once we get an idea of the costs associated with a judicial review, then we're going to be looking to try and find ways to raise those costs, to try and get that happening. Also, we're going to be looking at some point for people who will stand as the plaintiffs in the lawsuits we're talking about bringing against the government and against the polluters. Any questions?
Brilliant. Well done.
We think it's going to get a lot harder, given that the British government is entirely focused on its own neighbour with the whole Brexit disaster and everything else.
Yeah, in the short term, I think probably it will follow the pattern of like lawsuits against tobacco companies. The first wave of them, they probably will fail. And yeah, there are all these other things going along. It's just about building it up. So yeah, I don't think initially, we're not expecting a huge amount of success to begin with. But then we'll learn what works, what doesn't work. We'll hopefully build a momentum of people agreeing with us. And as the effects get worse and worse as well, then people will be looking around. And I think it'll be harder to disagree with us as things go on. But yeah, we're not expecting this to be a miracle cure straight away, but it'll be the foundations.
Okay. Another hand up there, Fiona.
Are you looking at something along the lines of a class action lawsuit eventually? Is that what you're looking to do?
I think so. That's
Shall I give you, for instance, Client Earth have recently taken the government to court over poor air quality, and they won a court order saying that the government's strategy for tackling poor air quality was groundless. It was completely inadequate, and the government went back to court and said, well, give us 18 months, and the court said, no, you're not getting 18 months, deliver the plan now. So, the idea is that it'll be a group of people coming together to launch a court case, represented by a barrister like Tim Crosland, to Plan B up, and the idea is to do for climate change policy what Client Earth did for air quality policy.
so.
I was at a meeting at Bradwell the other day where Natalie Bennett spoke, and I can't remember his name, Professor
Somebody Blowers?
Professor Blowers, yeah, from one of the local universities. And what I was making a plea for was for anybody from any of the groups that are involved in that to actually start making some sort of a plan to make people both legally and financially responsible for the witless decisions that they keep making.
Yeah, that's exactly.
I actually think that we should have actually, before allowing the government to override the decision made by the people in Preston, that any minister who tried to override that decision had to take on all legal and financial responsibility for anything that goes wrong. And I think the same thing should happen with nuclear power plants. That would make it so that these people would be very, very cautious in glibly making decisions about things that they do not even understand the remotest bit of the science behind.
Yeah, if it comes down on their head, if things go wrong, if things are going wrong as they obviously are, then yeah, that's exactly what we're doing, trying to make responsibility, accountability, yeah.
I think we need something that goes into law that makes people that make these decisions actually responsible for those decisions. I think from a local council point of view, it's quite difficult to do so, but I think when people are being paid to do a job and they're making these decisions, they should also be financially liable for the decisions they're making.
Yeah, that's exactly what we're talking about. Yeah, would be the point of this law. Is that yeah, if
It doesn't help when you're being killed by a nuclear accident, but at least it means that these people think twice.
about yeah, but it's true. If you're responsible, I mean, there are 400,000 people are dying at the moment because of climate change related disease. Yeah, someone has to be held responsible for that. It's been done knowingly.
Yeah.
Therefore, yeah.
Yeah, indeed. And we have the technologies now, a whole range of technologies. I mean, we don't have to do it. Dennis, I apologise. I gave away my phone and your phone. And now I don't know how many minutes we're up.
Any more questions? Questions?
Minute and a half left of Jason's questions.
Sarah.
Sarah.
Do we have an update on the group of teenagers that are in America that are taking to court the American government?
Not that I know of. I think that's still in its early days.
The court case has been launched.
That's been allowed to...
Yeah, the American government tried to have it struck out, but the courts have already said there is a case to be answered. That's not to say the courts will be in favour, but the courts have said there is a case to be answered and it's got to be go to a full trial, to a full court case. There's been a case recently in the Netherlands, Uganda case, I think it's called the Uganda case, where citizens took their government to court to say your plans to tackle climate change are woefully inadequate. We want something that's going to keep us alive, and the courts ruled in their favour. So the tide is turning. Any more questions?
Would it be possible to link with those teenagers in the neighbourhood and then like deliver support to them as well as like get some information from what they're doing, how they're working?
Yeah.
I think our barrister, we've been doing some
Tim
work
Court,
with.
there's a huge network, yeah, and every like I say, we're not going to win every case, but we will learn, and everyone will be corresponding and learning what doesn't work. So yeah, we're not personally in specific contact with those, but we're keeping an eye on them and